Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, a severe weather warning's in place at Old Trafford after Jose Mourinho claimed Manchester City's players are blown away too easily. Antonio Conte, he's heading for a storm after claiming Chelsea were never in the title race. And the clouds they've gathered over the former Premier League referee Mark Clattenburg. He claimed he went into matches with a game plan. Our guest with a strategy this morning, Alyson Rudd is a sports writer with The Times. Matt Law is the football news correspondent at the Daily Telegraph. You know that we normally have three guests on the show. One of them was going to be Oliver Holt this morning. He's the chief sports writer at the Mail on Sunday. Unfortunately, he's been beaten by the weather. He's stuck on the hard shoulder of the M40. We hope he gets home safely. Standing by is the legend, Patrick Barclay. He'll be with us very, very soon. OK, don't forget, you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on your screen over the next 90 minutes. Let's have a look at some of the papers then. The Sunday Telegraph, rather. The noisy neighbours ahead of Manchester United against Manchester City. Mourinho's had a lot to say. It is a tabloid dream this weekend. We've been Etihad. That's the message from Mourinho before that game this afternoon at Old Trafford. Huge game. The top dogs against the dirty dogs. That's on the back of the Sun this morning. Back of the Sunday Mirror. Cynical City. That's Mourinho's message. We're getting stuck into him in part two. Coutinho, he demands summer cop-out. That's on the back of the Mirror. He wants to leave. He wants to go to Barcelona, according to the Mirror. Prince Harry, back among the goals. Ali was at the game yesterday at Wembley to see him scoring against Stoke City. We'll talk more about Mark Hughes' position a little bit later on in part four, as we will about this man. Don't miss. Christian Benteke stepping up to score a penalty for Palace yesterday. He didn't score. He missed, and Roy Hodgson and the Palace fans not happy. This man's happy, though. David, he slays Goliath. This is the Sunday Times this morning. Big win yesterday for David Moyes. We'll talk Chelsea first off on the show this morning. You can count us out. That's Antonio Conte's message to the Chelsea board after another defeat in the Premier League yesterday. Let's start with at Chelsea, because you were there yesterday at West Ham at the London Stadium. An impressive win for West Ham, which we'll get onto, of course, Matt. But were you surprised by Conte's comments after the game saying, OK, that's us done? In fact, he said we're never in it.
That's what I was surprised about. I wasn't surprised he said that we're done. He's sort of been heading that way for a couple of weeks now. He's kept saying that Man City is going to take something amazing to catch Man City. He's kept saying they're doing something amazing. So you felt for the last few weeks he hasn't really believed. But then this little ad of just we were kind of never in it, it was almost like a flippant little remark he just added in at the end because he was upset about the defeat. And that's what made you look, because that will go down, I think, really badly with the Chelsea hierarchy. And
was he being honest, though, Matt?
He was being honest. He was certainly being honest about his own views, and it was just another little insight into how upset Conte was with the way the summer went, how frustrated he was that they didn't get all of his targets. And it just seems whenever they have a little bad spell or a little defeat, he can't quite help himself going back to have another little dig at, you didn't get me everything I wanted.
How did they play yesterday?
Oh, really badly. They didn't... I mean, in the second half, they came on strong, but they didn't have a shot on target. They started off really, really slowly. They keep conceding the first goal, starting games slowly. And it's the worrying thing for them, it's getting to the stage with them where if you stop Hazard, it's starting to look like you stopped Chelsea, because he's changed the system and brought Pedro and Willian out the team and playing Hazard with Morata. And it puts so much on Hazard that if you do get him on a quiet day or somehow you manage to stop him, they just fall down in the last third, and that's really what happened a lot yesterday.
With Conte, did you get the sense at all, Ali, that this is all about what's going on at the top of the table, that he wants to be challenging with United and City? Matt mentioned that he didn't get the players that he wanted to strengthen the squad because of the Champions League campaign as well this season. Is it all about that he can no longer compete with City and United?
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because he knew, and he would say, it is going to be tricky when I've got Champions League football and the Premier League. It's a juggling act. You can't do that unless you spend a lot of money like the top teams do. This is how you succeed in British football. So he didn't get the huge budget that Pep Guardiola got, for example, and now he's feeling it. There's been historically there's a clash of culture there between what Chelsea want to spend money on and what he wants to spend money on. He's a short-term manager who wants to buy in what he needs for the next 6 months, basically. Chelsea are trying to think longer term now, and so you will if you're a pragmatic short-term manager juggling various competitions, and that is Conte's style. You know what you need to get through that, and if he hasn't got it, he's not going to blame himself. He's going to blame the fixture list and the lack of available personnel, basically. And he's always going to be looking, I think, always going to be looking at those who have bigger budgets and are able to juggle when he can't. It must be very frustrating for him.
Have you got sympathy for him?
Well, not really, because that's the job.
Doesn't feel like
that's
it,
the
yeah.
job. That is the job. That's the job at Chelsea. You go into that, and he knew from the word go he wasn't. It was imposed upon him who he got at Chelsea from the very start.
The weirdest thing about this with Conte is that he keeps going back to him clearly not feeling he's got the squad, and yet his rotation hasn't been great around the Champions League and the Premier League. I mean, yesterday, Morata, I'm told, all week had been suffering with the virus, and yet he starts him, and Batshuayi's left on the bench. And Morata was off his game. I mean, he missed an absolute sitter towards the end. And OK, he might not fancy Batshuayi, I think we all know that. But surely, if you're complaining about the fixtures, you're complaining about players feeling tired, you're complaining you haven't got the squad, if you've got a guy who's been struggling with illness all week, then maybe give your other striker a go. I mean, Batshuayi's not the worst striker in the world. His strike rate's not bad, actually. And that's where I lose a bit of sympathy for him. I don't actually think he's used what's available to him as well as he could have done.
He's not a rotator in the normal sense. What he tends to do is he drops somebody, and it's very clear they're not part of his first-team plans, as opposed to making everyone in the squad feel they're in with a chance, and it's, you know, you're all playing your part. When he makes a decision to not play his, what you'd say is his recognised first team, you really feel he's making a bigger statement than just rotation.
Yeah. Going into the game, you wrote a piece about Marina Granovskaya's influence at the club. What prompted that, Matt? I mean, the timing turns out to be perfect, doesn't it, with what happened yesterday at the London Stadium? But what provoked you to write that piece, or was it something that you had in mind?
Well, I mean, it's something that I had in mind since Michael Emenalo left the club, because Chelsea are really interesting in their hierarchy. That Ron Gourlay left as chief executive a good few years ago now, and they didn't replace him, so they've got no chief executive. And then Michael Emenalo, the technical director, leaves. And, I mean, they are going to replace of sorts, whether it be a like-for-like or a different. But at the moment, they don't have a chief executive and they don't have a technical director, which is very unusual for a club of their size and their position. And with every departure and every change at Chelsea, more power shifts over to Marina Granovskaya, who is listed as a director of Chelsea. That's her title. She doesn't have a bigger title than that. And she's a very interesting character, because obviously we all know that she's extremely close to Roman Abramovich. She graduated from Moscow University and went straight to work for him in one of his oil companies in 1997. And her rise from nowhere through Chelsea has been astonishing, and yet nobody really knows an awful lot about her. She doesn't do interviews, she doesn't really do public appearances. She's a bit of a mystery to everyone. So I felt it interesting to go and try and talk to people who did know and who had worked with her, to try and find out, A, how she got the influence that she's got, and B, almost where this is all heading with Michael Emenalo going, more power coming into her. What's the kind of plan with her almost? So that's why I went about it.
Yeah. What was the view that you were left with, having spoken to people about her role, her influence at the club? Yeah,
I mean, her role, it couldn't be bigger. I mean, she is solely in charge of transfers and contracts. I mean, I wrote that I think across the age groups, she was in charge for 120 contracts in the summer, and the negotiations for that would have gone into this kind of 500-600. Unbelievable workload on her, and she will be solely in charge of January. I think no matter who they get in, whether it be a technical director or some sort of head of recruitment, I think they will now report into her, whereas Michael Emenalo would go straight into Roman Abramovich. So she's going to have the overall say on the football side of transfers and contracts on pretty much everything.
What do you get the feeling that they've reined in transfer spending since she's been in charge, since she's taken over, since she's been given that role? They've
completely changed it. I mean, it was very much, you know, how much the question would be when they went in to go for players when Roman Abramovich first came in is, you know, how much? We'll pretty much pay anything. You come in. It's now almost like a one-in, one-out policy. They want to balance it up, and what they buy in, they also want to bring back in sales. They run it pretty tight. And they have a budget now. And so, I mean, it was described to me in the summer, they basically had a decision if they had a budget where they felt you could either go and blow the whole budget on someone like, go in for someone like Neymar, or you've got that budget for 5 or 6 players, and that's the decision they now make. So I think it has changed a lot. I don't think there's less money. I just think it's done in a completely different way, and that's partly forced upon them through financial fair play, because they struggle with that a lot more than the Manchester clubs.
Sure. OK, a little bit of breaking news. Paddy is in makeup. He'll be with us very, very shortly. I want to see that. Should be on the yellow ticker on Sky Sports News very soon. Paddy Barclay in makeup. He'll be here soon. Good win, though, for West Ham. A really important win for David Moyes yesterday.
Absolutely.
And just this picture, I mean, let's just show you again the picture on the front page of the Sunday Times this morning. Just says so much. So it's relief there, it's happiness, of course. It's Chelsea as well, which means so much to West Ham supporters, but that is a big win for him.
It is a big win. I would temper saying how big a win it is by saying Slaven Bilic was also capable of pulling off a big win against a team like Chelsea, and he did that. And that's what kept him in the job longer than the board now accept he should have been in the job, because he kept pulling a win out the bag when it was necessary. This has to be, for this to be a significant win, this has to be more than one of those blips where the crowd are up for it, the team are up for it, because it's a derby game, and it has to be a sign of progression that West Ham have grown up, they're getting fitter, that Moyes has got to grips with the squad. It's the new manager bounce, but with some length attached to it.
I think that the interesting thing in terms of longevity of it is boring stats for you, but they ran yesterday 15 kilometres more than in the first game of the season, which, OK, you can run it, it might not be so useful, but it was really evident watching them. They were far better organised, and the work behind it was completely different, and he's clearly making an impact from that perspective, and I think that will serve them well. Yeah.
You like Moyes, don't you?
Yeah.
You admire him. You think he'll get the job done. They're still in the bottom 3 of the Premier League. Yeah. Despite that win yesterday, but it's such a crucial victory for them.
I mean, I've never bought into this kind of thing that's developed from the Man United time that, you know, he's almost this kind of washed-up manager. I thought he's put in the hard yards at Preston, at Everton. I was really impressed with him as a manager at Everton. He's gone through a few bad years, but I do think in this country we get a little bit wrapped up in they're finished. They have a bad time, they make some bad decisions, and that's them finished. Where there's so many examples of the top managers, particularly the top foreign managers, who go through terrible times. They suffer relegation, some of them even get sacked, and yet they come back stronger. And I'm not saying David Moyes... Sorry, that's a little bit... I feel like applauding.
Good to see you, thanks.
Doing handshakes across, it's brilliant.
Paddy Barclay's here, thanks for you saved the show.
Listen, I'm very, very sorry. I battled through the snow, so I do apologise to everybody watching for being late.
It's a great job. We get to see your hairy chest as well, which is good.
Yeah.
It's the first thing on a Sunday morning.
Yeah. That's for all the churchgoers. Yeah.
We're talking West Ham Chelsea, just so you know what we're discussing. So I'm sure you'll buy in or get into the conversation very quickly, Paddy. Thanks very much for coming along there.
It's a pleasure.
Moisey, are you a fan of?
This is
his biggest fan.
Yeah,
here,
I
wouldn't say biggest, but I am
up you up there. Okay.
Sounds like you are.
I'll definitely come in with you on that one. Yeah.
No, it sounds like you are the biggest, because his appointment was not greeted with great enthusiasm amongst most of the West Ham faithful, and that's partly because at Sunderland he spoke defeatistly, and as soon as it got difficult, he started saying it's over. He talked about relegation too soon. You don't use the relegation word. You just don't use it. He used it all the time at Sunderland, and he started to say the squad wasn't good enough. And he said similar things the minute he arrived at West Ham. He started saying, you know, the players really need to pull it together. They need to work harder. He even name-checked a few, and Arnautovic was one of them. And that can backfire horribly. And it seems to have worked. He seems to have clicked with Arnautovic that he has to put in a bit of extra effort, and he scored the winning goal yesterday. But it all could have gone horribly wrong. And if all it takes is for West Ham to escape relegation just by being fitter and running further, then fine. But I wouldn't say that necessarily means he's been the Moyes-ire, as you put it earlier.
Yesterday as well. I mean, obviously he kept Joe Hart on the bench. He started with 3 out-and-out strikers on the bench, no out-and-out strikers you would call in the team. And actually it worked brilliantly, because what he did is he put his runners up front and realised that he could try and hit Chelsea on the counter-attack.
How big a call was putting Adrian in ahead of Joe Hart?
A really big call, because now, I mean, Joe Hart's now on the bench for the foreseeable future, which is a complete nightmare for him. But it's the right call. He left Chicharito on the bench the whole game, didn't bring him on at all. He might not be particularly happy about that. But again, it was the right call. He took risks, and it worked, and I admire him for that.
Yeah. Paddy, do you want to talk?
Yeah,
Moyes, do you want to save it all for the Manchester derby?
No, I'd love to talk about David Moyes, because I think he's... unfortunately, David Moyes, who's a long-term manager, he's a manager that if I were a chairman, I would use for long-term jobs, keeps getting short-term jobs, which are not ideal for him. But so he has to use shock tactics, the R word at Sunderland. And here, I think, an even more powerful statement, which was, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something I was absolutely shocked at what some reputations are actually producing. And presumably Arnautovic was one of those. And the trouble is with that, we still don't know. It was a great victory. But if you're pinning your hopes on Arnautovic, you're in big trouble, because he'll give you one good game a month. And if that changes, absolutely brilliant. And I don't think... I disagree slightly with Ali in that I think he's really got no option but to try, you know, electric shock treatment to squads that are clearly in need of it.
Yeah. Would they be safe on him? You think he'll do the job?
I think they have a very good... Yeah,
better chance than they had.
Better chance than average. Better chance than they did, because they were just sliding, which is a bad sign, really, when you look at... There is talent in that squad. And the way they put paid to the previous manager, I mean, was absolutely disgraceful. But we're getting used to that.
Yeah.
It's just not manager's fault anymore. You know, sometimes you get squads of players that become uncoachable, unteachable, unmotivatable.
Yeah.
If that's a word.
The joke, of course, is Arnautovic didn't know you'd get booked if you jumped into the crowd, because he doesn't score often, you know.
Oh, poor fella. OK, let's move on. We're going to talk Manchester derby next. It's United against City at Old Trafford later this afternoon. Paddy, if I could interrupt you catching up on your busy social life.
Yeah.
We need to talk the Manchester derby, if that's all right.
Oh, please do. Can't wait.
Let's talk Manchester, and it's United against City this afternoon at Old Trafford. There suddenly is a little bit of needle in this fixture, isn't there? I think Mourinho perhaps added to perhaps provoke that with his comments in his press comments on Friday. Is that what this game needed? Did it need that extra edge?
Probably didn't need it, but it's been most welcome, because we're seeing it's crystallised these two personalities, these two managers, which we were very excited about when we thought, at last, we've got Mourinho and Guardiola in the Premier League together. It didn't quite kick off last season. Now they're battling out to see who can be the top team in the country. So just on a pure mathematical, most important game of the season, it matters. But now we've got both managers rising to the occasion, and it neatly sums up how we view those two managers. So Mourinho has been he's been quite spiky and really going for it. I mean, he's basically this week he's called City players divers, and he says they practice the dark arts, which in fact he's got a point, because what he's saying is that if they lose possession, City, they will foul in a sort of organised, tactical way to get possession back, which is exactly what Pep Guardiola did with Barcelona. Everyone used to gush about Barcelona, but when they lost possession, they would do something, a tactical foul, to make sure that they weren't flooded in the counter-attack. So everything Mourinho's saying has some validity. And on the other side, you've got Pep Guardiola being Pep Guardiola and sort of rising above it, or seemingly rising above the spat, but just letting us all know he could have gone to Old Trafford. But he just didn't really understand he'd been invited, which is a real put-down. So you've sort of got sort of slightly more classy, gossipy stuff going on one side of the city, and on the other side you've got something a bit more direct. Yeah, he said he didn't understand Sir Alex Ferguson when they sat down and had dinner in New York.
yeah, I'm sure. But I don't, you know, I'd love to have a tape of that conversation, to know how hard Alex tried. But anyway, that's history now, or would have been if it hadn't been for Pep very handily playing that card when it was necessary. I think we'd be disappointed if all this pantomime wasn't taking place. I think we'd be absolutely... I don't just mean
because we expect
people like journalists. Yeah. I mean, we expect it. It's cleared the air. Thank God. We know what you're thinking. We know what you want to do. Just do it. Because at the moment, Jose's kind of positioning himself as a sort of moral guardian of football. You know, no dark arts. None of the dark arts that he took from Sir Alex. You know, none of these things that he's made his reputation
injuries as
on.
well, when he said earlier in the week, well, you know, we're honest about our injuries. When we have injuries, we have injuries.
Yeah, and that, and then everything else. But you know, the question of fouling. I mean, as Pep laid down, this was 5 seconds to win the ball back. He didn't necessarily mean win it back with a fair tackle, although Barcelona were, under him, were the best tacklers the best ball winners in the world. But yeah, they weren't angels. But I don't, looking around the Premier League or even any other league, I don't see many teams who don't foul tactically. I think it's one of the worst things in the game. If I was in charge of the rules, I would have cumulative team yellow cards, you know, to try and stop this fouling in rotation. But it's part of the game, and people use that horrible, you know, cliches are never nice, but taking one for the team, I think, is one of the most misleading things, because you're not actually taking one for the team. You're meaning that you can't foul next time because you've got yourself wrong side of the player.
I was at Stamford Bridge last season for the FA Cup tie between Chelsea and United when Mourinho, I think, did he put Herrera on Hazard, man-marked him? They rotated and fouled on Hazard all through the game, completely on rotation on Hazard through that game. So he's as culpable as anybody for that.
He's just alerting the referee.
Yeah, exactly.
What will be the approach this afternoon of Mourinho? Because Guardiola's in a couple of the papers today. Some of the guys have used the quotes from him saying, I'd never park the bus, I'm not that kind of manager. Will Mourinho play a defensive game, or would he be more open at Old Trafford?
That's the most fascinating thing about the whole game, how Mourinho approaches it, with them trailing City and having to win, really. Everybody wants to see him go for it. Everybody fears he will park the bus and then in the last kind of 20 minutes try and nick a 1-0. And that's almost the most interesting thing about the whole game, is when Man United come out for that first 15 minutes, how's he going to send them out? Do we see them on the attack? Without Pogba, I see him parking the bus up a little bit and going for that last 20-minute victory.
With three forwards, three really good forwards, well, Martial has become a really good forward, you know, with three really good forwards and one in reserve, how can you not attack? How can you not play to your strengths? I don't see how he can't go for it.
It's not in his style in the big games, though, is it? I mean,
no, it's not. No.
It's almost like, you know, back in the day with Mourinho, we did praise him for this. You know, he would, in the big games, shut the big games down, get out of there with a point or 3 points, and then win every other game. And we would say it was tactical brilliance.
When you're 8 points behind.
When you're 8 points behind, and also City have changed it slightly in that they literally go everywhere to win, and they do at the moment, which puts huge pressure. You can't just go for a point as the other teams.
Will there be any doubts? Will there be any doubts among Man City's players and their squad and their manager after defeating the Champions League against Shakhtar Donetsk in the week? Would that have just created a little bit of doubt?
No, I shouldn't think so. That wasn't a game that they needed anything from.
But only the disruption of the winning run, win, and then it's...
No, I think if you're any good at all at managing, you make sure that that's not significant at all. In fact, you could argue it would be counterproductive for them to have given it that significance, and it would have been counterproductive for Guardiola to let anyone involved in the squad think that we are on this run.
Yeah,
and a blip in Europe would affect morale. No, I think you would have managed that very carefully. And it felt, the build-up to it and everything around that match felt like it's insignificant. It doesn't matter. There's a greater glory around the corner. We're being sensible. So no, I would think that would have zero effect on this afternoon, to be quite honest.
Where will City look to win this game? Is it at the influence of and the creative spark of De Bruyne, Sterling in the papers today talking about the goals that he scored this season, David Silva, or can it come from a more unlikely source?
Well, I think the most likeable thing about City at the moment is the unpredictability of how they score a goal. There was an analysis in the Times yesterday. They went through all the goals that City have scored this season, all of them. And there's a huge variety of types of goal. And I was surprised that 14 of them are what you call tiki-taka goals, which surprised me there were that many, actually, because I thought that had sort of gone. It was a way of tiring out the opposition, playing lots of passes, but that it has resulted directly in 14 goals. But they are strong in every area. They can score from set pieces. They can score individual goals that rely purely on one player having that ability to sachet through the whole team like Raheem Sterling can, or just see that there's a gap. De Bruyne can do that.
Last week, that pass was as good a pass as...
Or the 1-2, the link-up play.
Yeah.
Again, another way of doing it.
The pass from De Bruyne and the a high ball for David Silva.
But if you're playing against them, how on earth do you don't know what type of beautiful goal they're going to score?
You just have to defend well and try and see the game out, which, you know, nearly happened. Who did they play last weekend?
It was West Ham and Huddersfield before that.
Before that, you know, that patience. So obviously that's true. And when I said, you know, Man United will attack them, they'll counter-attack, obviously. But I mean, with those three quick and relatively informed strikers, you know, what a countering-attacking prospect. I think it'll be a great game.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Andy Dunn, of course, a regular on this programme, his column this morning talks about Mourinho and United fans and their allegiances. He says United fans like Jose, but they'll never love him. Is that right?
They'll love him if he somehow claws back this gap and beats City to the title this season, I tell you that. I think it's a bit early to say that. I think it will be very dependent on what he achieves. I mean, if he manages to lead them to the title over this City team, whether it be this season or even next season, I think they will love him. They might get frustrated by some of his tactics and some of the things he says, like a lot of fans of clubs do. Chelsea fans used to get frustrated by his constant goading of the opposition and some of his tactics, and yet when it came down to it, they absolutely adored him because he put the trophies on the table. If he does that at United, they'll love him.
But it's horrible having this City team in the same city for a club with the expectations of Manchester United. So I'm not saying give them a bit of sympathy, but it's hard for these two. I mean,
they're not the noisy neighbours anymore, are they?
No, well, the thing about it is that the worst thing that ever happened to Pep Guardiola's peace of mind was Mourinho arriving in Manchester, and the same is true the other way around. I mean, I don't really believe in looking at football through the prism of the management, but you can't not in this case. It was fantastic in Spain, and I can remember thinking, you know, watching Clásicos and thinking, God, this is what sets them maybe a little above us. But now they're here. Now it's that kind of drama.
But when you watch the Clásicos when they were in charge of...
Well, the first one was 0-5.
Yes, it was.
A 5-0 win for Pep.
And after that,
he
tried to shut up shop.
Yeah, that's right.
But when you watch those games, or leading into those games, were you more interested in the managers or the football?
I still think it's about the players. But it's great preview material, if you like. I mean, we're sitting here. We could talk all morning about this, couldn't we? Easily. So I just think it enhances it. But it'd be no good if there were two teams of 11 useless players going out to represent them. Obviously it's the players. It's the game we want. It's the whistle to go and all those fantastic players to be battling. That's what we really want.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's what we'll get this afternoon.
I bet it'll be a great game. I really do think it will.
Of the two managers, which would you prefer to play for?
Oh, my word. Well, because I'm slightly lazy.
I'm doing that composite thing, which causes so much controversy at the moment. So we don't need to go through the 11 because that really will take all morning. But let's cut it down to the managers. Probably
Mourinho, because Pep will, even if you think you're doing really well, will tell you you're not, and he'll want more and more and more. That sounds like really hard work. Whereas if you click with Jose, I think you can probably coast for a bit. So I'd probably go with him.
Yeah.
I think either. I really think...
No.
I'm sitting on the fence. I think
they're about to sign
either.
you for 100 million. They're both They both had bids accepted.
I'm afraid it'd come down to the wages with me. I'm a mercenary. But I think either would be wonderful to play. I don't actually.
Okay, mentally.
On the face of it, but on the face of it, they're completely polar opposites. But I actually think to play for and to be part of their squad, it wouldn't be so different. Because I just think once you're in with both of them, like Alyson said about Jose, I don't think it's that much different with Pep. I think once you're in with them and you've convinced them, they'll protect you, they'll look after you, they'll make you better. I think both would be fantastic to play for.
I prefer to play for Mourinho because, as he proved with Zlatan, he favours older people.
I'll just go Pep because no one else has said Pep.
OK, let's get around to what's going to happen this afternoon. Manchester United, they need to win this game for obvious reasons because of the league table. What will happen?
Well, we were made to do our predictions, which I hate having to do. And I went for 2-2, although I do like the narrative of Zlatan coming off the bench and scoring against the man he doesn't like very much.
Yes, yeah, of course they fell out when he signed for Barcelona, didn't he? Yeah.
And I go for a narrow City win, 2-1.
2-all.
2-all. Is it over if they win? If City go and win, is that it?
No, I don't think it is. I think City will go through a bad spell. I know we've already started looking for it, and even when they've had a bad spell in front of goal, as they have in the, or by their standards, a bad spell in front of goal over the last couple of weeks, they find it harder to score, but they've still picked up the points. But I really do feel that a team with as generous a style of football as this will have a spell where they create 20 chances but lose 1-0, and that kind of that could corrode them. I don't think there'll be more than 6 points between these teams at the end of the season, and I don't know how it'll happen, but I just have that feeling that a Mourinho team will just stick and stick and stick and not be so pretty, but it'll just hang around and annoy City right to the end.
Right, to the end. OK, we'll see. We'll see what happens at the end of the season. We'll see what happens this afternoon. Of course, you can watch Manchester United against Man City. It's live on Sky, kick-off at 4:30. OK, next up, we're going to talk Mark Clattenburg. Doesn't referee in the Premier League anymore. He's still creating headlines. More on him next. Welcome back. With us this morning, Patrick Barclay, late substitution for Oliver Holt. He's already making diva-like demands. He's wondering where the Sunday Supplement Christmas tree is. He'll be here for your next appearance, which is
Christmas Eve.
On Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
It will definitely be here for then. Alyson Rudd, who isn't a diva, but has a cranberry and raspberry tea lined up for him. Matt, happy with the banana, aren't you?
Yeah, very happy.
Yeah. Let's just remind you what's in the papers this morning. Sunday Times, this man's happy. David Moyes, big win for him yesterday as West Ham manager. They beat Chelsea yesterday at the London Stadium. Everyone at West Ham will be happy for a change. What will happen here, though? We've been Etihad. That's Mourinho's message before the derby in Manchester this afternoon at Old Trafford. He's saying cynical City, Mourinho. Says they go down like they've been blown over by the wind. Philippe Coutinho, he demands to leave in the summer. He wants to go to Barcelona. The back page of the Sun, the top dogs against the dirty dogs. Benteke, don't miss. Oh, he did miss, didn't he? Bad miss for Benteke. Won't take another penalty, according to Roy Hodgson. Just to finish off Sunday Telegraph, rather. The noisy neighbours. OK, let's get into Mark Clattenburg, because he had plenty to say at the start of the week. His quotes picked up from an interview in America, Paddy.
Yeah.
I know you've got some quite strident views on his game, on the idea that he went into Premier League matches or matches that he officiated with a game plan.
Yeah, I mean, you've got... I was absolutely shocked. I mean, really, really shocked.
Shocked that he did, or shocked that he admitted
it? Yeah, it's both, really. I couldn't believe... I know they talk about managing the game, which is another horrible phrase, in my opinion. You know, the rules are there. The purpose of the rules, the laws, is to manage the game. And the only management job a referee has is to apply them. And his contention that he kept players on the field who could have been sent off. Now, I think you've got to say, because it's such a grave offence against the integrity of the game, in my opinion, because then another part of the referee's job is a duty of care to protect players from injury. And if players who should have got a red card got a yellow just because he wanted to get away without any bad headlines, I'm afraid that's a very, very serious matter. affecting, you know, the implicit duty of care that the referees and those who appoint them have for the participants in a football match. But I think you've got to preface it eventually by saying that we all say things when we're carried away with our own eloquence. We talk big. And it may well be that Clattenburg exaggerated how much influence, godlike influence, he was exerting over a very important football match.
I have to say, Paddy, I did wonder that.
If, you know, but I do feel that he had a duty to, if he was just talking big, to say, look, I didn't mean that, to backtrack, to come down off your pedestal a little bit in the interests of the game, and say, look, I didn't really mean that, giving us all, because I think we all, when we heard it, we all had a sort of say it ain't so, Joe reaction, you know, please don't mean this. And I think the fact that he hasn't done that or even been asked to do that is something that's very wrong, that the FA in particular, the Premier League, have really let us down a little bit on. They may well say he's out of our jurisdiction. He's head of refereeing in Saudi Arabia, something like that. But he's in FIFA's jurisdiction, and the Saudi Arabians are not outside the world football family. This incident to which he refers was done in the Premier League under the overall aegis of the FA, and they are, in my opinion, negligent in not following it up for that reason. Doesn't matter that he's since gone to Saudi Arabia. There should be no fugitive status in football. The whole point about it is that it runs its own affairs. And I'm just aghast at the whole thing. I mean, it's something that we're just so glad, and I'm so glad you're talking about it today, because you obviously take it seriously, and everybody connected with this programme does. I just wish the authorities felt the same way.
I agree with Paddy on that, because I think it casts doubt now on all the other referees.
It does.
Because we try to fight against, as a press and within football, everybody tries to fight against the fact that there could be an agenda. We hate it. We hate people accusing us of agenda. People in football hate being accused of agenda. Mark Clattenburg's admitted to having an agenda.
Which was personal.
Exactly.
His own image.
And that now fans and even the press, it casts aspersions on all the other referees. If another big game is refereed in a certain style, you wonder whether that referee has gone in with the game plan or the agenda.
And the authorities not...
If I was another referee in the Premier League, I'd be furious about it, absolutely furious. Just like, as a journalist, if a journalist suddenly came out and said, oh, yeah, I had this agenda and I hammered this because of this, be furious about it, because it taints your profession, and I think he has tainted the refereeing profession with his comments.
I spent a day with Howard Webb just before he refereed the World Cup final to see what you do as a referee, because the point was you don't just truck up and check you've got your cards and you whistle and just do it. And it was fascinating, because Howard Webb would visualise the game. Yeah. You know, like tennis players say they visualise winning. He would diagonally walk around the pitch and visualise the noise and the style of play of both teams, and he'd want to get into the zone to know what sort of incidents he was going to have to expect. So if you've got a long ball team against a team that are more passing, where the action areas are going to be. This is all taking your job really, really seriously.
Good professional referee.
And good referees, all referees do that. Yeah. All referees do that. And what Clattenburg has done is taint it with the sense that all that preparation that someone like Howard Webb would have done isn't about making sure you referee the best way you can for the good of the game. Yeah. It's somehow about... It's about me. It's about me, the referee, looking fantastic. How will I influence the game? It's. I think you're right. I think you're right. I think he probably was stating it bigger than it was at the time, because if you're giving an interview, you want to sound interesting. I mean, he's just bigging himself up. Yeah. I doubt that he actually thought those things at the time. I really hope he
Well, I think
didn't think those things at the time.
You're being very charitable there.
He said he was thinking about the headlines as well, though, wasn't he? You know, he was thinking about what the papers and the pundits and and that's just a nightmare. I mean,
again, that's twisting. Referees do think about that, but not in that way. They think about it in terms of if a good referee knows it's not about me.
Yeah.
And the best referees are ones where you can't remember their name and you don't even know exactly what they look like because they've just done it so quietly and efficiently and correctly and in keeping with the style of the game that you don't notice them.
I mean, sorry, Ash, just very briefly, we don't help actually by, I don't mean particularly writers, but people who present match reports. I sense that they're trying to get away from this boring, the referee, you know, the referee was the most important player on the pitch and that's wrong, blah, blah, blah. You can understand why referees don't want that particular. Everyone likes to be liked. I also think that newspapers who print these little league tables of referees, sendings off and yellow cards, the ones who've sent off the most are at the bottom of the table. I can't understand how that can make any sense at all. It's almost as if we want people to be Clattenburgish and not send people off so that we can put them at the top of our table. There are lots of things, you know, that but they're only minor details next to what Clattenburg has said and done, or pretended to have done, or
just want to go
purported to have done.
I just want to go back to your point on Howard Webb. Isn't his preparation a game plan? You said that he would contrast the styles. He would imagine himself on the pitch, listening to the crowd, and thinking about, okay, is this, you know, the classic possession-based side against the long ball merchants? Isn't that a game plan?
Well, it's the phrase game plan sounds sinful now. There's nothing wrong with being a professional. He's being paid quite a lot of money. You don't just turn up. You have to have a plan. Game plan sounds like you're engineering something. He's only planning. A good referee's only planning to be reactive. But you can only be reactive effectively and fairly if you know what to expect.
You can react quicker if you've anticipated, and there's nothing.
You've got to be standing in the right place.
Nobody's going to go into a Merseyside derby expecting it to be played at testimonial pace, and that's good. That's good. That's what you'd expect from a referee.
But do you change the style of refereeing based on the occasion? So it's the Merseyside derby, the tackles are going, there's going to be some thunderous challenges in the first few minutes.
But if there's a dangerous tackle, it's a red card. If there's a reckless tackle, it's a... if there's a...
no, you're right, dangerous is red, reckless is yellow.
Yeah, I mean, that should be the case if it's the first minute of the Merseyside derby and somebody goes over the top, then it's red card. And anybody not doing that is saying, OK, you can go over the top again, and break somebody's leg, and then maybe I'll yellow card you. You know, I mean, that's dangerous. So, of course, you can't do that. You've got to judge the fouls. And you talk about prep. I don't know how much pre-match where referees go in to dressing room. I mean, why not go... You know, I don't see why you can't go in a Merseyside derby and say, by the way, if you think I'm going to be patient with my cards today, you're wrong. You do something naughty and you're off. So it's not my fault, it's yours. That's good prep and good anticipation. And I don't know how much that's done. It should be done every game, I think.
Yeah.
But there's no excuse for what Clattenburg said, you know, and all that kind of prepping is great. You know, that's terrific. That's what we want from referees who really understand the game in that way. And because the more they study the game technically, the better the referees they're going to be. And I think things have improved in that regard.
Do you know what you said at the start of that sentence? Do you remember what you said?
What?
I'll make this brief. Something I've never heard Patrick Barclay say.
Oh, sorry, yeah. All right, set myself up.
Poch won't talk about Poch won't talk about it. Any reason? Doesn't want to go back.
I don't think he wants to go back. It was probably his most painful moment as a manager. That, and you know, it just reminds everybody that Tottenham did blow up that night at Stamford Bridge. They did let it all get to them, and he's talked about that before in the immediate aftermath. I just don't think he wants to go back there at all, even if it's talking about a referee performance. Yeah, sure. OK, good stuff, guys. We're actually going to talk about Tottenham in a few moments' time, because Ali watched them lose. Sorry, Ali watched Tottenham beat Stoke City yesterday at Wembley Stadium. More on that is coming up in the next few minutes.
Well, I think we're almost up to speed on Paddy's social life, are we? Almost just about.
Well, we probably need one more interval.
One more, OK. Well, you've got another interval coming up. Let's have a brief respite for you while Ali talks about Tottenham and Stoke yesterday, because you were at Wembley Stadium, a big win for Tottenham, but everything's going wrong for Mark Hughes that could go wrong at the moment. A big defeat, and Stoke fans are on his case. Should they be?
Yes. It was...
That's a reluctant yes as well, Ali, wasn't it?
Well, but mainly because I've just come away from Wembley, and Mark Hughes is someone who's very eloquent in defeat and will give you time. But he wasn't taking any responsibility for the performance. He was basically saying they've got to learn to be cleverer. There are a lot of disappointing things about Stoke. One is they got hammered by City in October, 7-2. And you would think that was the wake-up call. That's the moment when you think, right, when our game plan for that phrase again, game plan for playing teams that are just better than us. Yeah. We just have to be cleverer, and they made the same mistakes again. So you do worry about a manager that repeats history in a short space of time. There were some peculiar things going on as well. He has a young defender called Tom Edwards, who this was his second match for Stoke, second start for Stoke, and his first one was against City. And you think, oh, well, why have you done that? And Mark Hughes said he did it because every player has to learn the hard way. I haven't quite heard it put that way before. I thought you might want to, yeah, by all means, let a young player know what it's like to play against the big teams who are going to score a lot of goals against you, but also give him chances against teams where you might get a good 0-0 and feel like you've really been part of the team. So that was peculiar. The defence was one of the slowest I've seen in the Premier League this season. There's that, you know, sometimes you have images of defenders that they are those sort of tanks that look great when the ball's in front of them, but if they have to turn around and deal with something behind them, they just move very slowly. So it was quite painful at times, just how slow. But there's lots of nice, tricksy, good. I mean, Joe Allen actually played quite well yesterday, but the rest of the team are it's just quite slow and ponderous. And when fans are wondering whether Mark Hughes is the manager, I think it's because there didn't seem to be a way of... It was as though he hadn't even thought about what Spurs can offer, and it was as though they were playing in a vacuum. It was peculiar, and I don't see with what Hughes has got, the resources he's got, how he's going to turn that around, because he just needs a much faster team, especially at the back. It's a difficult one to see where you go from that. He'll probably make big changes to the next game, but I'm not sure who he's got to bring in. Yeah, he's got some big games coming up. He's got West Brom and West Ham, I think Huddersfield as well, in the next few weeks. Matt, is it a case of he's been there 4 or 5 years, and there's that kind of malaise just starts to drift in?
I just think they got him in to try and, you know, move on to the next level from Tony Pulis, which was always a tough gig, because you felt that once they discarded what Pulis had done with them, it was going to be tricky. Were they ever going to get above sort of mid-table or start playing the beautiful game? Probably not. But it hasn't really gone anywhere. It's just sort of, you know, he plodded along for the first couple of seasons, doing OK, and you know, finishing well, but you didn't get the sense it was heading anywhere particularly. And now, the last season or so, they're starting to slip backwards again. And as Alyson said, you can't really look at the squad and think, oh, he can do this, he can do that, he can bring this player in. I don't think the recruitment's been particularly good. They're now, that old Pulis squad is now breaking up. People like Glenn Whelan left, and they're actually missing them more than they thought, I think. And I think it looks like a bit of the heart and spirit from the squad that was there with some of the kind of Pulis scrappers has deserted them now. Yeah, sure. OK,
Mark Hughes seems to be under a bit of pressure then at Stoke City. Palace back on the bottom of the table, and that is because Christian Benteke missed that 92nd minute penalty yesterday. Paddy, Roy Hodgson clearly upset and angry and frustrated with his striker for deciding to take the penalty.
Yes.
Have you got any sympathy at all for Benteke? Striker without a goal, wants a goal, confidence low, wants to be the match. And
if he scores the goal, if he scores the goal, of course we wouldn't be saying, we probably wouldn't be querying it, and he would have self-fueled himself for what you hope would be the kind of scoring runs that he went on in you know, earlier in his career at Aston Villa. So but you know, you should not go out of instructions. You shouldn't. I mean, the designated penalty taker was, you know, his name.
Military.
Yeah, exactly. It's easy for you to say, but I mean, you should not step away from team discipline in that way. And I think you've got to be Cristiano Ronaldo, who we're going to talk about in a minute. You've got to be Cristiano Ronaldo to do that, not Christian Benteke.
He put himself ahead of the team. At the end, you know, he's in a team that's fighting relegation. They're not mid-table. Yeah. And he put himself ahead of the team.
Yeah.
You saw the reactions. I mean, it was astonishing to see some of the reactions of, even before he's taken the penalty, you've got James Tompkins witnessing what's going on and going crazy in the background, even before he's missed it. And clearly his teammates are furious with him about it.
If he'd have smashed it, instead of trying to be clever and sending the goalkeeper in either direction, the ball just floating into the centre of the net, would it have caused the same storm?
A different storm, I think, because that in the immediate aftermath, it would have all been rosy. Yet another late winner for Crystal Palace. This proves we're going to get out of trouble. We're a resilient team.
If his approach to the penalty had been different.
Sorry, you mean physically?
Instead of being casual and saying, "Oh, this will just go in," if he'd have smashed it and still missed, would the reaction have been different?
Oh no, I think it would have been the same, because it's more the principle of just messing with the heads of your teammates, and as Matt says, putting yourself first. But I still think even if he'd scored, I think there would have been negative implications, because the team would have known what he was about, and that wouldn't have sat comfortably with them, I don't think.
It'd be tough for him in that dressing room for a little while, I would imagine.
Very tough.
Won't be.
Especially as Palace needed that breakthrough. I think they'd had 4 home draws.
Well, they beat Stoke in their last home game. Yeah,
but they really, really need points, and you know, especially with Swansea getting that, you know, long-awaited win. They needed those points, and you know, just to do anything un-team in that, I don't think Hodgson will forgive that. No,
I don't. You're 2 big fans of Roy, aren't you? I don't know if you're in the same literary club, are you?
No, we do talk books. We do talk books.
He reads modern novels. No, he's. What was the question?
Are you in the same?
Are we in a book club?
Are you in the same literary club?
He reads much more intellectual stuff than I
do.
But Alyson does.
No, but you are big fans of Hodgson, aren't you? You've got a lot of time for him.
Oh, he's going to take them out of relegation zone, definitely.
He's got previous. You know, I mean, he's at Fulham. Okay, he left it pretty late. Last Danny Murphy goal in the last minute, but he knows that job, and.
What is the job? The manager goes into to a club like Crystal Palace, bottom of the table, can't win a game.
Professionalism.
What is the job?
Professionalism, exactly what Benteke didn't do yesterday. That's why I think he'll be aghast.
That's the key for you, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the key to get out of pattern of play, discipline.
Is know your resources. This is what all the good new managers, when you take over a club that's struggling, you work out what's been overlooked, how you can get the most out of players that have become a bit sluggish. He's brought Jeff Schlupp in, for example, because he just sees the guy's got pace. Stoke don't have pace. Those are the fine margins. He'll never get any headlines. That might be the reason the Crystal Palace escape, because if they have some pace. Yeah, OK, but they've still got time to get out of trouble, even though they are back at the foot of the Premier League. Let's move on to Cristiano Ronaldo. Another World Player of the Year, or Ballon d'Or for him, Paddy. He has talked about himself in interviews.
The best player of all time.
Yeah, is he entitled, as one of the undoubted greats of all time? Is he entitled to say about himself?
Yeah, if you were to have a conversation with you know, the great judges of Hugh McIlvanney, say, or people who've seen Pele, and I mean, I saw Maradona, a lot of Maradona, you would not laugh. Cristiano Ronaldo, you would not scoff at Cristiano's claim to be the best of all time. You might disagree, but he'd be in the envelope. He would have to be, along with Lionel Messi.
But is he entitled to talk about himself in that way, or is that for others to judge?
Obviously, it's for others to judge, but he's such a bumptious...
It doesn't matter.
He's such a bumptious individual, you know, that you kind of expect that. It's like You expect Jose to play the referees before the derby game. You expect Cristiano Ronaldo to say he's a demigod, you know. I'm a demigod.
It's part of what makes him. I remember Sam Wallace writing something about Ronaldo, which has always stuck with me, that he's the kind of guy that when he was at United, at a League Cup game against Torquay or something, he'd want to play because he'd see the chance to score 6 or 7 goals. That's why he'd want to play, because he'd fancy himself to go and score a stupid amount of goals. And that's sort of all builds into why he's become what he is. I mean, it's through incredible belief and hard work that he has got to where he is. And him saying he's the greatest, I think, is part of that. So I think you have to accept that is Cristiano Ronaldo.
You know, if he was as good as Marko Arnautovic and he said that, of course it'd be ludicrous.
Well, Bentner tried it, didn't he?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, of course it'd be funny. But if you're as good as Cristiano Ronaldo, yeah, it's sort of funny, but it's also worth debating, you know.
We're so British, though. We do like our heroes to be humble.
Yeah, like Messi. More like
we prefer,
Messi.
That's why partly why Messi is so beloved here, because he has a humility about him. But I agree with you completely. Cristiano Ronaldo would not be able to. He sometimes plays matches and you think, oh, he looks a bit ordinary. It's not really working for him. And by sheer willpower, he makes sure he scores.
And by the final whistle, it's Cristiano 3-1 pen. You know, he just. Also, the other thing I realised about watching him recently, and we keep looking for him slowing down and not scoring as many goals, and it just doesn't happen. He's 32, and he's played at the sharp end of football since, well, we saw him make his debut in our league when he was 18. And
cast your mind back to, say, the FA Cup final, Manchester United-Millwall.
Yeah.
When he was a very young player. I can't remember, he may have been 17, 18 at the time.
Yeah.
Would you have said then... I mean, I know he told the Manchester United dressing room, look, I'm going to be the best player in the world. Gary Neville's written about that before.
No, but
would you have believed it?
No, I didn't see it. I saw, you know, show pony, whatever. Like everybody else, I couldn't see. But Ferguson knew. Ferguson knew, and would tell people, oh, don't worry about this one. This is going to be a world-class player. And what's more, Ferguson also made the point at the time in private conversations that playing wide, as he did at that time, which he doesn't have to now, he can play wherever he feels like it, but having to play wide is the hardest place because, of course, half the pitch is out of play, if you see what I mean. You can't see the whole play. It's the hardest, it's the easiest place for you to get boxed in. And he said, despite that, he always creates. And don't worry, this will be a world-class player. Yeah. And he was within a year, 18 months of Ferguson saying that, he was. And I just think, watching him recently, he took a shot, where he could have passed, probably. He took a shot and it missed. And I thought, God, how often do you see that? How often do you see him not work the goalkeeper or make a defender sweat? Or
when he takes a free kick, generally.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, like Roberto Carlos.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah,
he doesn't talk about
famous for one. Yeah, he's certainly famous for one. Okay, just quickly round the table, guys. Best player you've seen live, then?
Diego Maradona.
Maradona.
Jari Litmanen.
Jari Litmanen. For Ajax.
Wow. No, when he played for Liverpool. The first time I saw him live play for Liverpool, I nearly fell off I was standing in a gantry at Villa Park. I nearly fell off. He was
I nearly
amazing.
fell off my chair.
He was amazing.
When you said Jari, I mean, look, don't get me wrong, good player.
No. Yeah. When he played well, gasp-inducing, beautiful player.
Yeah, okay, I like it. I like the romance.
Player, yeah. Messi, an honourable mention for Paul McGrath.
I thought you were going to say Jack Grealish. OK, Paul McGrath, honourable mention. OK, let's see if we get some honourable mentions for some players from Liverpool and Everton. We're going to talk the Merseyside derby. That's coming next. OK, it's derby day, huge day on Merseyside. It's Everton playing Liverpool this afternoon at Anfield. The impact that Big Sam's had, I mean, who do you think this is the bigger game for, the more important game?
Wow, that's a good question. For very different reasons. It's huge for both. I think...
But 2 weeks ago we said, oh, Everton are a relegation.
I think the fact that Everton have won a couple and climbed up the table, it's bigger for Liverpool, because that... what's becoming a bit of a top four race rather than a title race, dependent on the Manchester score today, is really going to get very, very tight, and Liverpool need to stay in there. So I actually think it's probably a slightly bigger game for Liverpool, because it's a bit of a... No derby can be a gimme, but if Everton get something, it's almost a bonus, isn't it? I mean, their record at Anfield is abysmal. So that's why I think the expectation will be on Liverpool, let's put it that way.
Mm. Liverpool, with the exception of Man City, of course, we've marvelled about them all season, but they're just scoring so many goals, Ali. I think it's 40 in the last 11 games. How enthralling, how exciting a team are they to watch?
No, they're amazing. The speed with which they break and how clinical they are when they do so, and the fact that Klopp is able to interchange various players. I mean, he's rotated more than anybody this season, I think. That's right. And it doesn't halt the flow. I mean, occasionally they have this awful blip, but right now, current form, then I would say probably right now you'd want to face them. You'd not want to face them. You'd probably rather face City, because at least on current form, City have looked like you can get at them, and they haven't been scoring for fun lately, whereas Liverpool are. And I agree with Matt completely. It's a free pass for Everton today. So the implications of an Everton defeat are not as significant as the implications for a Liverpool defeat, although Sam Allardyce, if he was able to get something out of the game, that would be a remarkably good way for him to kickstart his tenure at Everton, win over the Everton fans who are a bit worried about his style of football, and they would buy into it, and it could mean great things for climbing the table and forgetting all about the terrible start they had.
Mm. Of all the Liverpool managers you've seen over the years and had contact with, Paddy, where does Klopp fit into the fabric and the traditions of Liverpool?
Well, I think he's created an atmosphere. I mean, I can remember Bill Shankly, who basically founded Liverpool as we know it, this dominant, intimidating institution with hordes of fans. And I think Klopp is the nearest to that in terms of his apparently hands-on, almost tactile relationship with the support. I think that's his greatest strength, this sort of Pied Piper of Hamelin effect that he has, which was very reminiscent of Shankly. No Liverpool manager since has been probably as loved or as close to the support than him, and yet his record in terms of won, drawn, lost is no better than the excellent record of, say, Brendan Rodgers, for example, Gerard Houllier. So I would say that he's potentially the best in terms of producing a dominant Liverpool, which is what people of a certain age are accustomed to expecting. And he certainly he's made Anfield a place that, well, you should be frightened to go to. The only thing is that he leaves the back door open. I mean, he plays Rafa Benitez, and you talk about other Liverpool managers. Rafa Benitez's team, if you think of his team, you think of the protection for the back four from Xabi Alonso, from Mascherano. You couldn't see Sami Hyypiä because you had to get past those two first. It's complete opposite with this Liverpool. They play with 4 forwards and basically nothing in front of the back four. So they invite you onto them. If the trouble is getting possession, stopping the. You might have to score 7 to win the way Liverpool are playing at the moment, but they can be got at, and I think that's a great challenge for Sam Allardyce today to say, how do we hold that front four and hit them in that huge gaping hole in front of their back four.
Yeah.
They're the most fun team to watch, aren't they? Because of that. Because
even including Man City.
Yeah, Man City are a brilliant side to watch, and I would say the best team to watch. But Liverpool are the most fun because you go there expecting them to be brilliant with that front four, but you also go there with the slight unpredictability, and that they can go 2-0 up, and you wouldn't start writing your match report at 2-0 with Liverpool because you know it can go back the other way, and it makes them great fun to watch for neutrals. And their games are so open from both ends. It's brilliant.
We talk endlessly, Ali, about managers getting it right. What is getting it right at Liverpool?
What is he getting right, or what in theory should you get right?
What in theory,
do you need to get right at Liverpool? That is the big debate, because
is it the league title?
Well, exactly. If you meet any Liverpool fan in the pub, the conversation inevitably comes around to what would you rather? What would you rather happen this season? Would you rather you win the Champions League? Would you rather win the Premier League? And you'd think most Liverpool fans would say, we haven't won the Premier League. We're Liverpool. We've got to win the Premier League. But the romance in most Liverpool fans, you'd find them say, I fancy us to win the Champions League this season, actually. Fancy that. And that is the weird dilemma about the way Liverpool has evolved over the past 20 years. There's that sense that anything is possible in a knockout competition. We have a great, a Liverpool fan, we have a great European tradition. And the idea that someone, you know, some extraterrestrial would sit there and say, OK, well, this is magic now, you can only have one or the other. It's because it's possible to have both, but generally it's not. It's very hard to give up that idea that you're a team that knows how to conquer Europe. And to say we would almost, you know, forego that to be pragmatic in the Premier League. And Klopp is not pragmatic at all. He's not at all. That's why they're fun to watch, because he's not pragmatic. I can't find anyone behind the scenes at Anfield who says that Klopp takes sessions seriously about how to defend.
I love this.
It's all about defending because you play well going forward.
This modesty of Liverpool fans saying, we don't want them both, we'll just want them.
I mean, once he's got them back in the Champions League, they've qualified for the last 16. The next challenge after all of this has to be trophies, and it has to be.
They'll find out who they play tomorrow in the draw. Let's talk Sam Allardyce and the effect that he's had on Everton, because he's tightened them up at the back. They had a very good win. OK, I know he wasn't in Limassol for the game in the Europa League on Thursday night, but they are suddenly looking a lot sharper and a lot tighter at the back.
Yeah, he's done what you would expect Sam Allardyce to do. He's organised them. He's put them into a team rather than just... They look like a group of individuals, a bit like West Ham had looked, where they've got some players who think they're good players, but they're just all over the place and mishmashed in and no real plan. And they look like they've got a plan now, and they will have a plan for the season. The thing I just always fear with Sam Allardyce teams is that he will undoubtedly keep Everton up, and I'd imagine they'll finish around mid-table, top half of the table. But then, this time next season, the crowd will start demanding, we want to play this way, we want to play that way. Mashiri's talked about we're going to be a Hollywood club and all this, and that will then become the pressure that always seems to come back onto Sam Allardyce, fairly or unfairly. But for now, he's perfect for them, and he's organised them into a proper team.
But is it when one of his last games at Palace, I think I asked him, you can't be happy always being a firefighter, or do you get a thrill out of it? Is it nice being the go-to guy? And he said, no, I'm tired of that. I want to be able to build at a big club. Well, this is his chance.
This is his chance.
So what he has to do more than anything is to avoid that scenario. He has to get Everton to a point where this time next season, nobody is saying that.
He does, and he don't forget, I mean, he walked out on Palace to supposedly take a break, and he did take a break, but, you know, he thought it'd be a bit longer, so... There's a bit of pressure on him, I think, because he decided he didn't fancy another relegation scrap at Palace.
I think he's
sorry, Paddy, apologies. We've run out of time. But you'll be back soon, won't you? 2 weeks' time, Christmas Eve.
Yes,
thanks very much for stepping in, though, this morning. Late
first
substitute.
choice this time.
You are first choice. Late sub, though, for Ollie Holt this morning. Thanks to Ali. Good to see you. Thanks to Matt as well. We'll see you again on the supplement very, very soon.